I'm speaking with Professor Jim Klein. Professor Klein, what were some of the factors that influenced you to run for at-large office, sir?
Yeah, so I ran for the first time actually in 2020 for the District 4 seat, unsuccessfully, and then successfully in 22 for the at-large seat. And both times I ran really because I had a great deal of concern about the seawater desalination plant that the city is still pushing forward yet, even as we speak. But as I started to study this, and I've been looking at this now for about 7 or 8 years, I really think the desalination issue is a symptom of a larger problem here in Corpus Christi. That in too many instances in the past, and I think maybe the present as well, we've got city leaders who do not act in the interest of the general public. They act in the interest of a few, whether it's a few corporations or a few developers, and that's not necessarily in the interest of the general public. But the public then is being asked to kind of foot the bill for all of this. And that's what I got a real problem with. So with desalination, the paperwork that the city filed with the state says explicitly this water that's going to be produced by the desalination plant is going to be for industry. And yet it's going to raise everyone's water rates. That's how you pay for these things. Out in California, in San Diego, California, the Carlsbad plant went into operation about 6 or 7 years ago, and they saw a tripling of water rates for residents out there. I don't want that for Corpus Christi, right? And I understand our lake levels are getting low. That begs the question as well as to why those lake levels are dropping, because we're not in a drought, nor is the watershed in a drought. Has not been for at least the last 3 months. Why is it at 23% today? I think those are some hard questions we still need to answer yet. I worry that what has happened is that this happened under a previous council back in 2017, that the city council oversold our water supply. When they agreed to sell water to Exxon Sabic in 2017, they agreed to sell 25 million gallons of water a day to Exxon Sabic alone. The city provides 85 million gallons of water a day right now. So, that's a huge jump. Now, I will say this, that Exxon has restricted their usage now. I think they're using, either 11 or 12 million a day. But that's still a huge percentage of our overall water provision, because it's not just for the city here, but for all the surrounding counties as well. There are about 500,000 people that the city provides water to. And as I said, Exxon they voted. And again, that's in the past, but I will say this, that there were individuals, myself being one of them, who told the city council before they took that vote, don't do this. You're selling away our water cushion, our drought cushion. They did it anyway. It was a 9-0 vote. I think at that point I really decided something needs to happen here. I started talking to people in the city here saying we need to get better people running for city council. And I had some difficulty getting people to do that. And so eventually, when I couldn't get anybody else to run, I decided to put my hat in the ring myself. And fortunately, Sylvia Campos did as well. She's been wonderful in the city council with me. I tell everybody that she keeps me sane on the council. So, these problems I think are still going on yet right now. As I said, the desalination plant is still being pushed forward yet. It's still almost exclusively for industry, right? Because there are other steps we could take to alleviate our restricted water condition right now. I don't want to call it a drought because it's not. We could take other steps. We could look at conservation. That's the quickest way. And the problem we've had right now so far is that in the last 15 years, residents have done a very good job of conserving water. We've dropped our water usage, per capita water usage. The problem is that residents only use 16% of the water the city provides per day. The rest of it, about 50% goes toward large industry, large water users, and then about the other remaining, 34% goes toward commercial interests like car washes, restaurants, and that sort of thing as well. And so when you ask the residents to cut back, to conserve water, we have done that. It doesn't really move the needle very much. And we're at 23% right now, the lake levels are. If they go down below 20%, we're going to move from stage 2 water restrictions into stage 3. I worry that's not going to help us very much, because you're asking the residents to solve a problem that they can't solve, because it's not the residents that are using most of the water.
If I understand you correctly, you can only do so much with 16% of the pie. That's just math, isn't it?
Right. That's right. I'm a historian, but I can do that kind of math.
But I can do that. I think I can do that math. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that if all you have is 16%, well, that's about, even if you did 100% of 16%, you're still 84%. You still have an 84% issue, correct?
That's right. Yeah. Now, I will say this. I think the commercial interests have restricted some of their outdoor water usage as well. I don't know what percentage of the overall water usage that is. I think most of commercial interests, most of their water usage is probably going to be interior, especially for a restaurant, I would guess, but I don't know that. But the frustrating thing is that the large water users, the industries in the area here, claim that they're already conserving. There's no proof of that. And when we ask for proof, they don't provide any. And I will say this, that Exxon, as I said, has now voluntarily restricted its water use, cut back, I think, by about 11 or 12% in the last 4 months, back since last May or June. And while that's good, that's to their credit, it also begs the question, well, why can't other industries do the same thing if Exxon can do this? That, I think, is going to help us with our water supply more than anything else right now. But there are other steps we could take as well. We could look at water reuse. And CC Water actually has a pilot study looking at that. I think it's ongoing right now. We should have some results maybe by next March or so about whether that's feasible, financially feasible or not. We could look at rainwater capture on a large scale. We haven't even considered that. I don't know why. Because the weather patterns we got in the 21st century are such that you have no rain, no rain, no rain, no rain, way too much rain, and then no rain, no. So all that rainwater is just, there's a resource there that's being lost, right? And it's creating flooding in the area as well. You can alleviate two different problems at the same time to capture that water and then store it. I think we have the ability, the technology to be able to create storage facilities to store water on a large scale. We do that for oil and other items here in the area.
Sure.
I think we can do that for water as well. We should be looking at trying to reduce this still disgusts me. I mean, it's nobody's fault. It's just weather. It's just the way it is. The evaporation rate in the reservoirs is 50% per year. 50% goes up into the air. So if you put 100,000 gallons in the reservoirs in January 1st, by December 31st, you got 50,000 gallons left. How can we just let that be? And there are people in other parts of the country, communities in other parts of the country that are looking at that, trying to reduce that evaporation rate. You can do that by putting structures over top of the reservoir or floating structures on the reservoir so as to create shade, so as to reduce that evaporation rate. When I talk to CC Water about that, they just say flat out, our reservoirs aren't configured for that. But they say it in such a way that I don't think that they've really given it serious consideration. So there's other things we could do. We could look at the Mary Roads pipeline. It's running at 55% right now. I mean, what? 55% capacity. And it's up to 55%. It was, as of 6 months ago, it was only 40%. We raised it now to 55%. Why is it only at 55%? Because some of the pumps along the Mary Roads pipeline can't handle a higher capacity than that. Well, it seems to me like the easy solution would be replace those pumps. And then you can raise that capacity even from just 55, let's say, to 60 or 65 or 70%. You're talking about now maybe another 3 or 4 or 5 million gallons of water a day. That's going to help the residents here. The problem, I think, for a lot of the decision makers in the area is that they don't want an additional 3 or 4 or 5 million gallons of water. They want 30 million gallons of water. They want 50 million gallons. They want 100 million gallons of water because that water is for industry. That's the quantity of water that industry needs. And that's why they're so stuck on seawater desalination. Because it can provide those large quantities of water, as I said, at the public expense, and then, as it's currently configured anyway, threatening Corpus Christi Bay. Because in the desalination process, you remove the salt from the water, and then you pump that, what do you do with the brine? The salty discharge, they want to put that back into the ship channel again. And there's concerns that will accumulate in the ship channel, perhaps beyond into Corpus Christi Bay as well, and will... there's a word I've forgotten for this now, where you basically rob the water of oxygen, and it causes all the life.
Well, it causes an anaerobic, and there's an acidic component to it as well.
Right.
I think where it.
But the big concern is that the impact it's going to have on plants and animals.
Absolutely,
no,
both. Yes,
right?
Yes, absolutely.
So what the environmentalists asked, starting last spring, now 6 or 7, 8 months ago, I guess, is that the city should do a far field model. The city has done a near field model, which looks at the near short geographic range outside the outlet tube, but also only over a short period of time. The far field model would look at a longer, further afield, further out, but also over a longer period of time at the environmental consequences of all that. They have not done that up to this point. They've refused to do that. And I think that that's really what needs to be done to try to understand what the full environmental consequences of this are going to be. We should just look before we leap.
Well, that almost seems commonsensical, and you don't have to be an environmentalist to recognize a fact, or you don't have to label somebody to.
Right.
I mean, if there's no oxygen, a lot of things aren't going to survive.
Now, when we brought this up, the city manager, who tends to be very pro-desalination, and I will say this as a disclaimer, I like some of the things that Peter Zanoni has done. I dislike other things he's done, right? So I'm kind of divided about my opinion about Peter Zanoni. But regarding the far field model, he has said that would cost $800,000. I don't know where that number came from. I've seen no support for it. Now, they may be accurate. I don't know. I've seen no. You got to show me your homework. And so And if it is $800,000, even if it is $800,000, or perhaps even more than that, if we're talking about the life, the health of Corpus Christi Bay, I think that's worth it before we decide to do this. I mean, again, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for you. It's a lot of money for me. But for the city,
it's our bay.
And we're talking about a project that's going to cost, overall, it's going to cost more than $1 billion before it's all said and done. It's at $757 million right now, $750 million right now. And it's going to go north of $1 billion before it goes into operation.
Well, if memory serves, 1,000 millions make a billion.
Right.
So even if it cost $1 million,
right,
we're spending 1,000th
right,
of what we're going to spend if
right,
it goes through, just to
right,
make sure that this is something we want to do.
That's right.
Not just for us, but then we got, what about your kids? What about your grandkids?
Right.
I mean, I'm kind of old. I'll be dead in 20 years.
You and me probably both. But that's the thing is, and again, my training, my experience as a historian, training and experience as a historian has encouraged me to kind of take that long view, that decisions that are being made right now in 2024 are going to have an effect in 2074. I don't know what those will be exactly, but we need to have that in mind. Don't just look at the near short-term consequences. We here in the United States have been notoriously guilty of that, and because if councils made certain decisions back in 1974, those are affecting us yet today now in the 21st century, right? And so we need to kind of take that long-term view in all this.
Yes, sir. Something just more of a question, but it seems like the investment/business model in our country very much emphasizes short-term results.
Yeah.
And I wonder if has that perhaps spilled over into the political, and when we start talking about things in business terms or investment terms, and if those are short-term metrics, that's a deficiency then.
I think so too. I mean, and that's a problem with the business model of government, right? The corporate model of government. That's all the rage today. I mean, you see this in higher education as well, and it has its place. But you just have everyone should understand that the corporate model doesn't have a very good track record. About half of corporations fail. So it begs the question: do you want to adopt that now? I can understand. Again, the city manager likes that model, considers himself the CEO of the city, right, and that sort of thing. And that's all fine and good. That's his job. My job as a city council member is to push back against that and say, yeah, you go ahead and act that way, but this is still a government of the people and by the people and for the people. That means the people have to have a say in this. You can't just railroad everything through.
Okay, it sounds like desalinization could be everyone's issue for the foreseeable future. Are there other issues that you...
Yeah.
I'm sure there are, but what issues do you see in addition to?
So this is, again, another symptom of that same problem of the city government not acting in the interest of the general public. This is very kind of obscure, kind of in the weeds, but it has to do with the way that we finance or promote development in the community. And for the last 40 years, we've used a trust fund model where developers pay into a trust fund, and then they develop a new community, and they take money back out of the trust fund to help finance infrastructure to and from that development, that community, that neighborhood, for streets and roads and that sort of thing, for water as well. The trust fund model has not worked very well. It was this year now, I think, $9 million in the hole. The city council voted, I was in the minority, voted against this, voted to appropriate money out of the general fund to help basically bail out the trust fund. And I've got a real problem with this. So the issue I've got here is that the developers here now are kind of controlling all this, right? So they're deciding where they're going to develop. I'm okay with that on the one hand. On the other hand, if they decide we're going to develop now out on, let's say, London Estates, or beyond, let's say toward Bishop. Well, if that's going to be incorporated into the city now the city has to pipe water all that way out there, has to pipe wastewater all that way back once again as well. We have to send squad cars all that way out there, have to send fire trucks and ambulances out there. And on and on, natural gas, methane has to go out there as well. All these other utilities that have to go out there, garbage trucks have to go out there, code enforcement has to go out there now as well. Our population in the city here has been just about flat for the last 20 years. I think we have an annual population growth of like 0.4%, 0.4% of 4/10 of 1%. growth, annual growth. In the last 5 years, it's actually fallen. We peaked at about 330,000 people. We're at now 319,000 people. And yet, geographically, our city has grown quite a bit in the last 25 years, 20 or 25 years. And that's because the developers decide that they can make still more money out in London Estates than they can, let's say, developing areas along Castores or Old Brownsville Road or Greenwood Avenue, I guess, or Boulevard, all three of which have farm fields along them that could be developed. That development would be cheaper because there's already major trunk lines, water lines, streets as well along Greenwood and Old Brownsville Road already over there. All you have to do is run spurs off of them. But running all those utilities out to London Estates is far more expensive. It's putting a strain on our city. It's part of the reason we're having so much difficulty trying to keep up with and maintain our existing infrastructure, because we constantly add to it, even though the population is not growing. And so, since we are adding geographically to the city, that means the existing population, which doesn't grow very much at all, has to pay more and more and more in higher utility fees to help finance all of this. And as I said, the trust fund model, there's an option to change that up. It's still, I guess, maybe a possibility yet. We did a 2-year-long study. I think it was HDR. I have to check to be sure. There's an engineering firm that we hired as a consultant, and they recommended that we shift from the trust fund model to impact fees. If you go to impact fees, then you could vary the impact fees that the city charges to the developer based on where they develop. So if they develop along Old Brownsville Road, I would say keep the impact fees very, very low. If they want to develop out in London Estates or on the far side of London Estates, then you raise those impact fees because it's going to help to pay for that extra infrastructure they have to run all the way out to there. That came before the city council, and the council now has kind of pushed it aside, again, against my wishes. They want the city staff to study instead making reforms to the trust fund model instead. And that may work. I'm kind of skeptical about that. I think the fact that the consultant said we should do this, switch to impact fees, and it's not the first time. That's what would be most aggravating. Back in 2006, the city hired a consultant to look at the same issue. And the consultant then said that we should move from trust fund model over toward impact fees. And the city council didn't do that. And then in 2019, this consultant was hired again to look at the same issue, and the consultant said we should move from trust fund model to impact fees. And the city council didn't do that. And now it looks as if we're repeating the same thing now in 2024. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. We could still shift over toward impact fees. I think it's a much better model to adopt. Most cities in Texas and in the country use impact fees. Our trust fund model is kind of an anomaly. And that tends to discourage development in the area, outside developers from coming in because they don't know how to manage the trust fund model as well. So that's another one of the things, again, that it's difficult to kind of understand. And Eli McKay, who's running for District 1, actually knows a lot more about this than I do, studied this intently. She's a member of the Capital Improvements Committee, but who studied this trust fund model versus the impact fees. But what it means at the end of the day is that our utility rates are going to go up, or have been going up, to help pay for all this. That bailout, the $9 million, whatever it was, that came out of the general fund, that's got to come from somewhere, either property taxes or utility fees. That's the only two sources of revenue the city has.
So I guess if I'm a developer or a large business and I have some sort of contract with the city, if something doesn't go right, I have a trust fund.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's not enough in the trust fund, we just use money from another fund that the city has.
Right. The general
fund.
And
at some point,
right,
then the taxpayer will have to pay that.
Right.
I mean, it's not just.
Right. Either the taxpayers or the ratepayers, right? Utility ratepayers.
Okay. So the impact, just obviously I haven't studied it, but just looking at it superficially, it seems like the impact study makes a lot more sense for the citizens anyway of the city. I guess if you're a developer, either one works just fine.
It does. I'm in favor of infill development, right? And impact fees can help to incentivize that by reducing impact fees, as I said, along Old Brownsville Road or along Greenwood Avenue or along Castores Street. Infill development.
What is that? I'm sorry.
So it just means that you create new development within the city limits already, rather than on the outskirts.
Development. I got you.
Infill development, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Infill, yeah. The problem for the developers is that their profits for infill development tend to be lower, more narrow than it is for new development out as I said, halfway across the county. And so that's why they're building where they are. And that's their model, right? That's their choice. I just think that the city then should set fees accordingly to help recoup the cost of running services out to there, not even just initially to build the roads, but to maintain them then as well, and to send the garbage trucks out there for the next 20, 30, 40, 70, 80, 100 years, however long London Estates is going to be a part of Corpus Christi.
I forget how many moving parts there are to,
Right.
you get so used to driving around a city, you
Right.
think everything works magically. But
There's 29 different departments in the city, in City Hall. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Okay. So that's all that stuff's going on. Wow. Is there anything else you would like to see done or
I would just
work
say,
toward?
Yeah, just say this, that and this kind of touches on the desalination issue as well, indirectly. I think that we really need to diversify our economy. Up until December of 2015, I can just pinpoint the time. Our economy, there's a balance here in the area, in the Coastal Bend area, between the industrial side of the economy and the environmental side of the economy, tourism. People come here to fish or water recreation sports, what have you. And since December of 2015, that balance has been disrupted because the national federal ban on oil and gas exports was lifted. And that allowed the Port of Corpus Christi to explode in the last decade now. So we've seen a dramatic industrial growth in the area here now, so that our economy now is increasingly now dominated by the oil and gas industry. Now, I could have personal feelings about that, but I just think in the abstract, it's not wise economic policy to put all of our eggs in that one basket. We should be trying to diversify our economy instead, recognizing that oil and gas is here already. Most likely it's going to stay here for the foreseeable future. But we also have to understand as well that, and the trade journals have been saying this now for about 6 or 7 years, that the long-term prognosis for oil and gas is that it's going to go into decline. Yeah. And so this is the last basket we should be putting all of our eggs into because there's a hole in the bottom of it, right? And so we just need to look at other issues, right? So I think that tourism, we should be promoting tourism, and Visit Corpus Christi has done a great job on this, I think. I've done yeoman work on this, trying to increase tourism to the area here. But we should be looking at other things as well. I keep asking this question, why is it that the corporate offices of H-E-B and Stripes and Whataburger all used to be located here in Corpus Christi, and now they're not? What does San Antonio have? That's where Whataburger. What does San Antonio have? Or Dallas, Fort Worth? That's where Stripes and H-E-B went. H-E-B went to San Antonio, I guess, as well. What do they have that we don't have? And people keep coming back to the airport. That the airport is less reliable here. It's not a major hub here, and so that's why those corporations have left. And so these are just kind of questions we need to ask, because if we want to try to diversify the economy, I think we should. Then those are steps we need to take. If the airport is a stumbling block, then we need to give additional resources to the airport to see what we can do to enhance air service to and from Corpus Christi. In the year 2024, we don't need to be hung up on the fact. For the longest time, people said, well, corporations don't want to locate here because we're at the end of the road, literally the end of the road. But in the year 2024, having come out of the pandemic, people, even like myself, even I, can conduct a meeting virtually, right? You could lead a multinational corporation, not even just from Corpus Christi, but from some small town, burg in the area here.
Well, that's true.
From Taft, from Petronilla. If you had good Wi-Fi connection, you could lead a multinational corporation from anywhere. You don't have to be in a major metropolitan hub. So there's no reason why corporations should not be coming here. As I said, other types of corporations, whether it's IT, information technology, or others, could be relocated here to Corpus Christi. We just need to do the homework, try to understand what they need, what is going to draw them into the Coastal Bend area here.
Thank you so much.